from Microbe TV. This is Office Hours for Wednesday, May 28th, 2025. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and welcome to your viral corner of the internet where you can get information about science-y things like viruses. And we give you facts and truths, not lies and misinformation here on Office Hours, which is the live version of all the podcasts we do. So you can interact with one of the podcast hosts. Of course, what do I host? I host This Week in Virology, This Week in Microbiology, This Week in Neuroscience, This Week in Evolution and Immune. That's 5. And then Puzzcast and Matters Microbial. I'm not on those. So that's 7. What am I missing? Anyway, welcome everyone. It's good to have you all here in New Jersey. It's 13C and raining. It's really, excuse me, not a nice night. Who's here moderating tonight on our special Contagion episode of Office Hours? Les is here from California, and Tom is here from the Oregon Coast Range. Get your Contagion flubs ready, folks. I have a bunch of them too, but I want to hear yours. I just, where did they go? Office Hours, Contagion. There we go. Tell us where you're from. I want to shout you out. 559 B-Man is from Central California, where it's 91F. Oh my gosh. I would like some 91F. Maybe I have to get over there one of these days and get some 91F. Excuse me a minute while I... Got a nice switch where I can turn on and off the microphone. Brian is in Montreal, 23C, and quite nice. Dagfinn is in Norway, where it's 2 a.m. and 8 degrees Celsius. Rainy. One of these days I'll remember where everyone is from. I don't remember where Rainy is from. I got some other comments we don't want to look here. Oh, yeah, Pete says the calendar was out of date, so I just made it through June. Wayne is in Urbana, Illinois, where it's 69F, 21C, and sunny. And just to preempt our discussion about Contagion, John found a flaw in Contagion. Matt Damon and Gwyneth Paltrow would never live in Minnesota on purpose. So I said, why? He said, just comic relief. I think Minnesota is a fine place to live, although many fly to a southern residence. Yes, snowbirds. A lot of people here in the Northeast are snowbirds. They go to Florida. Never catch me in Florida, folks. Sorry to those who live there, but the governance of Florida is just off base. Midge is in Sydney, Australia, 15 at the moment. Elizabeth is in a damp and chilly West Virginia. John is 15C in the land of Contagion. I think the fictitious company AIM was loosely based on 3M. Hello, Leo from California. I know that. Will is in Changsha, 20C. Kang is in Chicago, 14C and cloudy with more rain on the way. And Steph SF has joined us as moderator. Welcome, Steph. Good to have you. Mr. Doreen is home on a Wednesday evening so he can watch. Good to have you. Dorothy Charging Hawk is in Duluth, where it's warm, calm, and perfect. 66F. Coralie is from Braidwood, New South Wales. Tom is in the Oregon Coast Range. Contagion DVD from the library. This one motivated me to pester VR, keeping my thoughts until everyone has had a say. Yeah, we text back and forth a bit today about this. Les says, hi, Vincent. Enjoy the easy camaraderie with Paul Offit and you. Plus, it's so well explained. Thank you. Yeah, Paul and I get along. We see eye to eye. And I just ask questions and Paul explains it. He's great, right? Yep. 59 BB Man is expecting 41C on Saturday. Crystal Abrams is in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Welcome. Hey, look who's here. Alina from Coxsackie, New York. My microphone my microphone. And my microphone is here, but sitting on it is my dad's microscope, which has your name on it. I think I have your address, and it's just really my fault that I haven't packaged it up. If you still want it, I will send it. It's just I'm not gonna. It's heavy, and it needs to be put in a wooden frame first, and then. But I have little sticks around. I could do that. I'm a little handy. Xavier is, well, hello, Xavier. Where are you? Leo is not late today. Windy conditions in the North Carolina, California coast. Current temp 55 F. Visto in Sydney, where it's cold and wet. Laura is in Washington, PA, 16C and drizzling. Krishnan from Malaysia, where it's morning. Good morning, Krishnan. It's great to have you here. Peter is in Boulder, Colorado, where it's cloudy and 55F. Cheryl's in Southern Ontario, cool and rainy 12C this evening. Rona from Long Island, enjoying the rain and cool weather. Pete is in London, where it's mixed weather, 15C at midnight. Must have been warm in Cyprus, right? David Riggs, Seattle, 77 and sunny. Twiv, twim, twip. I forgot twip. Right. And beyond the noise. Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, yeah, so that includes office hours. So we got Twiv, Twim, Twip, Twin, Immune, Matters, Microbial, Puscast, Beyond the Noise, and office hours. That's 9. And I'm on everything except Matters, Microbial, and Puscast. Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Hello, Carol, our favorite nephrologist from Bakersfield, where it is 31C. Lovely, lovely. Michelle is in Philadelphia, 73 and pluviose. Excellent. Keep the buzz going on the pluviose. Lucas is in Germany with 12 degrees Celsius. Elena says it is about 72F in the Hudson Valley. Logotic is in Chicago, 13C. Hans in Ecuador, 28C or 82F. There you go. Metahan is in Delaware, where it's pouring. Hello, Steph. 58 degrees in San Francisco, sunny and windy. Mark is in Edmonton, Canada, where it's 27C. Lise, Columbus, Ohio, 63, cloudy and damp. Abdur Rahman from Brooklyn, where the weather is pretty much the same as what we have here. Mr. Doreen lived in Florida for almost a year. Glad I escaped. Microbio AFOL, hello from Elgin, Illinois. Midge asks, have you heard of dizziness after COVID? I'm suffering 6 weeks. Maybe one of the long COVID signs. Ask Daniel. Daniel at microbe.tv. We're recording tomorrow. Hello, Betty in Washington Heights. Xavier is already starting with his Contagion. So I want to get through everyone, then we'll do some Contagion. Tona, regarding HPV, when you get this shot, does it mean they're immune from getting the virus or they cannot transmit it? Well, this is a good question. First of all, it prevents cancer, right? So it prevents disease. And I believe it knocks down viral loads sufficiently so that transmission is very inefficient, because that's the other effect of the vaccination, right? Dorothy likes Minnesota. Now, Dorothy, trampled by turtles, you live in their town, right? That's what you said on Tweevo the other day. Alina, thanks, V. If you want it, if you don't want it anymore, but it's here. I haven't given it to anyone because I know you wanted it. And I have your address, so I'll get it out. Mike and Lori are in Seattle, 77F. Xavier is in Southern Ontario. MN is in DC, where it's raining. Gallbladder 8 is in muggy, rainy Baton Rouge. Aubrey L., Richmond, Virginia, overcast bordering on drizzle, 16C. It's wonderful. 16C in Richmond, Virginia. Privyet Veronika in Moscow, 17C. It's 3 a.m. The sky's already light blue. It's the season of almost polar days. Well, we're glad you're here. Welcome. I wonder what you think about the Stalin statue that they put up in your subways. Well, you don't have to say. I'm sure you have an opinion. I just saw that today in the Times. Mr. Doreen, 288 Kelvin in Elgin tonight. Dean is in Minnesota, 60F. Dr. Bro Shropshire from Birmingham, Alabama, where it's 77F and cloudy. Good to have you back, Doc. Elizabeth is in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, 13. Love your channel. Thank you so much. We try. Why haven't they approved Novavax for those under 12? Well, the kids are not going to get any COVID vaccines, apparently. Which is not right. I mean, if you already have 3 shots, maybe you don't need a booster. But what if you're born and you have no shots? Can't you get vaccine? No, you can't, because, well, they just said you can't, but it does reduce the incidence of long COVID, and over 1 million kids have got long COVID in the U.S. So I guess they didn't get the email about that when they decided not to let anyone under 65, unless you have a comorbidity, have the vaccine. Marie Boutin, hello. Any thoughts on a summer surge? Yes, as you know, last summer we had a surge of COVID, and I'm hoping we will not this year. Why? Because it's crazy to have a summer and a winter surge. That tells me that there's not enough population immunity yet, so we should be good. There should be no summer surge. That's my prediction. But, predicting is very bad. But I'm going to do it anyway because I would rather there isn't a summer surge. Heather is in Kamloops, BC 34C. Margot is in Phoenix Metro 101F. Wow. Gallbladder 8 is in muggy Pluvio, Baton Rouge. Jill is in Delaware. I don't think she introduced herself yet, but she's in Delaware, which is probably rainy, I'm going to guess. Manav, hey, I wish to identify entry receptors for a virus that is unknown. So you find a cell. So there are a couple of ways you can do that. You find a cell that doesn't have receptors, that doesn't bind the virus. And then you take, there are a couple of approaches you can do. One way, you could do a genome-wide CRISPR knockout of cells that do have the receptor and look for the gene that, when knocked out, blocks virus entry. And then you get that gene and you put it into the receptor minus cells and confirm. That's one way to do it. Markle, East End of Long Island. 12C, not happy RFK Jr. changed the COVID vaccine recommendations, especially for pregnant women. Yeah, it's not smart. Pregnant women need it to protect them and their fetus. And so do people under 65. If they want it, they should be able to get it, especially kids who get long COVID. Carol says, apparently Dr. McCullough shocked the Senate with bombshell claims exposing COVID-19 vaccine risks, which is all lies, of course. Yeah, they should get Dr. Griffin or Paul Offit, right? He would dispel that. That's ridiculous. It is probably a party line thing, right? Liam is in Perth, 15C, finishing a night shift. Jeff is in Elgin, Illinois, 60F and clear. Paul, currently 17 plus hours of daylight in Moscow. Okay, I'm sure more people will be coming in, but meanwhile, there were a couple of questions that I skipped. I did the HPV. Okay, why don't you start with your COVID thingies. Now, there's the best way to do this because you can't text very long, but I asked you to find 3 things that are scientifically incorrect with the movie. You don't have to do 3. You can do 1 per chat thingy. I don't know what you call it, per chat. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to look at all of them and see how you did. Because what did I say last week? You're going to get if you get them all right, you're going to get an item of your choice from the Cafe Press store. All right, so I saw one already here. Where is it? Maybe it's up ahead. No. I should have marked it right. In the meantime, the rest of you can start to put your stuff in. Oh, he had it in here, and I can't search for it. Oh, here we go. Javier. Regarding Contagion, the protagonist said something along the lines of, virus kills cells too fast, so we can't grow the virus. Which doesn't seem like a real problem for an infectious agent. So, yes, that's also something that Tom Steinberg mentioned to me today in the chat. It seems unreasonable. I don't know why they're doing that, right? I mean, it's not something that a virus would evolve to do, right? How can it grow? Obviously, it's growing somewhere in nature, reproducing in nature. So why is this property evident in cells and culture? It doesn't make any sense to me. I agree that that's kind of a flaw. I don't know what they were thinking. Now, there's one thing I can say about this. If you make high titer preparations of adenoviruses, so adenoviruses are these icosahedral particles with fiber proteins sticking out at each 5-fold axis of symmetry. So they kind of look like a Sputnik, right? If you make high titer stock, those pieces break off, and they are actually toxic to cells. They will kill the cell. So if you don't dilute the virus back enough, if you put concentrated virus on cells, it will kill them before it can reproduce. And that's the only example of that I know, but it's only for putting high titers on. I mean, if they were having a problem growing it, they could have diluted it, right? And put less virus on, and maybe that would solve the problem. But it is weird. I agree. I agree with you. Okay. I see the participations flowing in now. I don't know. We may go the whole night with these. That's fine. But in case people are quiet, I do have a mini lecture for later if there's time. Right. Okay. Let's see. Hey, John says, Dr. Peter McCullough lost his board certification. He's a hack to say that there are horrible side effects. It's ridiculous. Now, the whole Senate was immunized, and none of them have big problems, right? Idiots. Okay, Lucas says, a bit confusing was to test the vaccine on only one individual. Yes. Which individual? You mean the Dr. Hextall, right? Yeah. Yes, that's it. That would never happen. Even in a rushed situation during COVID, we use the right numbers of people. You have to do it right. One person is useless. That would never happen. But, the thing is, in a science fiction movie, which this is, they compress time, right? Because you can't have people sitting around waiting for a big clinical trial to get done. So it's a compression for the movie's dramatic effect. But I still want to find the wrong compressions, right? Osterholm was on Science Friday talking about the misguided RFK advice. Said it's important for young who've not been exposed and pregnant people. Not just RFK, but Makary and Bhattacharya. They all signed off on it because none of them get it. None of them get it. I don't think they even read anything because they would know about long COVID and the deaths from COVID in kids. Here's John. Beth, played by Paltrow, seems to go from contracting the virus to shedding it too quick. Absolutely. Absolutely. She shakes the hand and then she goes into a casino and blows on the chips, and that's supposed to be spreading it. No, it's going to take at least 3, 4, 5 days. Who knows? 7 days. It's too quick. But again, it's the compression that they did. They want her to, she's not going to hang around in Macau for 5 days and then go to the casino. And, it just, yeah, that's why they do it. But you're right. It is absolutely wrong. Elizabeth says they plotted exactly when a bat and a pig virus is recombinant based on the genes, which the data wouldn't show definitively. You can do some pretty good recombination analysis. One of the papers we recently did on TWIV was looking at all the recombination sites in SARS-CoV-2. So I think you can do that well, but you need to have both viruses, the parental viruses, right? If you don't have that, you can't do the recombination analysis. EHS Talent says, my apologies. I made a complete fool of myself. Not here on office hours. We just make mistakes, okay? You're not a fool. After stumbling upon Prasad speaking in a video and being a layperson, I misjudged his vibe to represent evidence-based science. Well, I'm glad you recognize it. That's great. I know better now, especially after the last clinical update, which was all about the man. Haha, thank you so much, Vincent. I'd be lost without you. You'd be fine, but happy to help. Sandra Demetz, hello from Mexico, but not living there at the moment, right? Neem says, when a helical capsid is self-assembling, what tells it when to stop getting longer? Well, a helical so the genome length, basically. When it hits the end of the genome, it stops. Whether it's 2 or 5 or 12 kb, it's the genome that stops it. El Mug is in Pueblo, Colorado, where it's 22C and a bit cloudy. And EHA says, this is correct. My confusion last week illustrates how difficult it is to communicate scientific truth to lay people. It is. Yeah, if you have the right slick person, RFK Jr. is not slick at all. He doesn't have a good vibe, but Prasad can, yeah. Even reasonably intelligent folks can be easily fooled by smooth-talking experts with misguided intentions. Yep. Yes. Doreen says, don't worry about your learning journey. We're all here to learn and come from all backgrounds. You're among friends. Yep. Of course, Edward Jenner didn't do a modern clinical trial, just a few kids. Yes, Pete. But we do modern clinical trials now, so it doesn't matter what Jenner did, right? We're in the modern era where we know what kind of clinical trial, how many people we need to power it properly, okay? And one is not enough. John says, I would like to say the movie really impressed me with everything it got right. There were things I was looking up that I thought sounded fishy but were correct. Utsav, regarding the entry receptors for Torqueteño virus. What if we don't have a positive cell line? You mean you don't have a cell line without receptors? Okay. Well, then you must have a tissue that's positive, right? And if the genome has been sequenced, then you can look at all the membrane proteins, the plasma membrane proteins. There are only about 1,200 of them. And you can make pools of, you can buy the DNAs for those and make pools of them and test for conferring susceptibility. Elizabeth says they used supplied air suits to go into the room to store the virus samples without plugging the suits into the air supply. Oops, I didn't even pick up that one. Yeah, that would be a problem. I know because I've been in those BSL-4 labs. You have to keep changing your tube wherever you walk. Carol says, my son and daughter-in-law are expecting their first baby in October. I will pay for the COVID vaccine if it is not covered by insurance. Yes, I do. And since you are a doc, you can get it, right? So that a lot of pharmacies won't give it to you if you're under 65. People have had that problem with RSV vaccines. If they are not over 75, they won't give it to them. But you're not going to have that problem. Yeah. Very unique. I'm very much against the reconstruction of that Stalin statue. It's hard to describe how much I hate him, but there are people here who don't believe he did the things he did, and they're given voice. Yeah, we always rewrite history, don't we? It's ridiculous. Like there are people in this country who said the Holocaust never happened. This is just ridiculous. Go away. Just go away. Leave Earth. We don't want people who try and rewrite history. I thought you would feel that way, yes. Mark Martin. Mark Martin. Hello, Mark, in Tacoma. Sunny and 73. Very nice. We're doing the Contagion episode of Office Hours, Mark. We're going to point out 3 things that are scientifically incorrect in the movie. Scary old internet lady. Have you discussed the new razor blade throat COVID variant? No, we haven't. Frankly, I don't care about COVID variants. They're just more fit. They take over. They replace the previous virus because they're more fit. I'm not convinced that they have different symptoms at all because it's very hard to make conclusions from looking at people without the proper controls. Listo says lay people need and deserve experts that tell the truth. It is such betrayal that we don't get that so much these days. Yeah, less and less as years go by. Elena, thank you so much for your support of science communication. Oh, you're going back to work. Thank you so much. I promise I'll get you this microscope. Hello, Questella. I know Questella's ready for Contagion. John says, in the movie, they're failing with inactivated virus killing primates. Would inactivated virus kill like that, and their next step is to go to the live attenuated? So I don't remember. Do they claim that the inactivated is killing them? That's ridiculous. It's not going to kill them. It's inactivated. What it might do is not induce good immunity, which we saw happening with some of the SARS-CoV-2 inactivated viruses. And then when you challenge them, they may die. Maybe that's what you mean. But not necessarily. I think you could try and make subunit. Nowadays, you can make subunit like a Novavax type vaccine very quickly. And it's a paramyxovirus. So is respiratory syncytial virus. And you can just put a couple of prolines in the spike and get a good amount of spike protein made. I don't think you need to go to attenuated. Nope. Mike, how true is this? The wellness market, which includes supplements, is now larger than the pharmaceutical industry. And will it get worse with RFK? I don't know. It's really big, and that's how the anti-vaxxers make their money. They all sell supplements of some kind, which are supposed to be better than vaccines. And, of course, they don't, and people die as a consequence. I don't know how big it is. Pharmaceutical industry is pretty high. Let's look it up. Yeah, the global wellness market is now 3 times larger. So $3.4 trillion compared to the $1 trillion for the pharmaceutical industry. Hmm. Okay. Jude Law. Mark Martin. Jude Law. Jude Law. What about Jude Law, Mark Martin? What about Jude Law? Mark Martin enjoyed Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman. Mark, this is a horrible movie scientifically. It's horrible. And Dustin Hoffman sucks. Do you mean Contagion? It's much better than Outbreak. Okay. Mike wants to know if the lab leak disinfo has finally been laid to rest. No! For God's sakes, it doesn't get laid to rest, and I don't know why. I don't know why. It keeps coming up. The economist at Columbia just says there's clear evidence for a lab leak. Some people in Germany say, the U.S. government says, and it's all wrong. There's no lab leak, folks. I'm a virologist for 45 years. There's no lab leak. Oh, my God. And none of these people saying it's a lab leak are virologists. What do you think that means? Okay. Sorry. I get very passionate about this. Gwen is watching the movie. Yeah, people don't seem to want to chip in. So Tom is going to chip in. Okay. So long as people are reticent to chip in, how about that sudden mutation to increase the R naught? Oh, yes. This is ridiculous. Why would that happen? That's just crazy. And first of all, you can't measure the R naught like that in an outbreak just by measuring number of people infected. You have to account for people getting together, right? You have to account for numbers of people getting together in various venues, and they don't do that. But what would be the purpose? It's already transmitting very well. It's the same thing with SARS-CoV-2. It's already transmitting really well. Where's the pressure to increase the R naught? No, I totally think the R naught is bogus. Sorry, Ian Lipkin. Folks, give your Contagion. I guess you didn't watch it. You didn't do your homework, did you, folks? Okay. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Mark Martin says, by the way, Vincent, last time I was boosted, I wanted to try Novavax. The pharmacist said very few people were asking. Well, you know, Mark, boosts in general has very low uptake. You know, the mRNAs and Novavax, very few people. Although here, people want to be boosted, right? And they want Novavax. But in the general population, yeah, very little demand. Jeff says, regarding the Stalin statue, there was a clip of a Russian soldier apologizing to the reporter for an old woman's desire for a Stalin-like ruler to provide stability she enjoyed under Soviet rule. You know, it's ridiculous, all the horrible things he did, and people want that back. You know, we have the same issue in our country. The current president did horrible things in his previous administration and got away with it, and now he's doing horrible things again, and many people like him. I just don't get it. And while we're on the subject, Aubrey writes, rewriting history or leaving out material misconduct like fighting to preserve slavery and overthrow the Union, or in Stalin's case, signing treaties with Nazi Germany. Yes, leaving out materials as well. Okay. Let's see here. Bingus. What are your thoughts on the NIH fund cuts affecting MD, PhD, and other graduate programs? So as you know, the NIH funds a number of MD, PhD students, the Medical Science Training Program, MSTP. Not every university has one. It's very coveted. And I don't know. I haven't heard of that being cut yet because MDs, we do need them. So maybe somebody in charge will at least recognize that where they can't recognize anything else uh, about what we need. So the problem is lots of places do not have MSTP programs. And so what's going to happen to them? The universities are not going to be able to pick it up. But even more important, even for the MSTP or the people, the MD PhDs who are in the program, the MSTP program, they have to find labs to work in. And that's my concern, right? Because, right now, Harvard has no grant money and they have an MSTP program. What are they going to do? That's a concern. And I think in many other universities that have been cut, it's a real concern. Finding a lab that's viable. Now, some sciences may not be cut unless you're in the Columbia or Harvard or some other university that he's punishing, right? So I'm very concerned about these programs for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so they say that the virus entered an African AIDS population and that the are not changed. This is just ridiculous. First of all, an AIDS population is going to have reduced immunity, right? And the virus is going to do very well without any changes. I don't get that logic at all. And, I have never asked Ian about all these things. I don't want to, he's my friend. I don't want to bug him, right? I don't want to get him mad. But someday I should. I do have dinner with him now and then. So Ian, I have this 3-page list of things that are wrong with Contagion. And he'll say, Vinny, let's just eat. All right, what's next? Carly wants to know, could you please tell me what the cutoff age is for COVID? 65 and over can get boosters. Anyone under 65 cannot unless they have a comorbidity that is known to make COVID more severe. And there's a list of the comorbidities on the CDC website. Now, I'm not sure what happens with kids who are newly born if they're allowed to get. So anyone under 65 is not supposed to get a booster now. But what if you're born and you become 5 years of age and you can get vaccinated? Will you be allowed to get the whole primary series or not? I'm not sure about that. It's a good question. Do babies receive any virus vaccinations free? No. It has to be covered by your insurance. We had some free COVID vaccines for a while, but that's all gone. That's it. Okay. Yeah. So Tom says in the movie, the inactivated vaccine was ineffective, so animals died in the challenge. Right. Okay. That makes sense. Les says Stalin is Hitler with a nicer mustache. He murdered millions in Ukraine and Russia and then had a 1939 pact with Hitler. Could there be a vaccine black market? This is a very touchy subject, Mike. I'm not sure. So the bona fide companies that make vaccine, right? I don't think they're going to want to put their vaccine on the black market. So that means you're going to have rogue companies making the vaccine, right? And I think that's a big problem. It's not going to be tested properly and regulated and so forth. So this could be a disaster. Yep. Dion said, did you ask that before? Because I answered that question. Funding cuts on MD PhD programs. Yeah. I'm very worried. Hello, Keith from the Long Point First Nation in Winnoway, Quebec. You're welcome. We'd love to do these programs. Mark says, I cannot take Jude Law seriously. You mean the character in the movie? Yeah, it's a little exaggerated, right, for dramatic effect. But there are plenty of anti-vaxxers who are Jude Laws, right? Who sell alternative, what is it called? The market. Let me look it up. A supplement market. Sorry. Supplement market. So, yeah, they exist. Yeah, John says a line in the movie, human trials would take weeks. We did it in COVID, right? Why can't we do it in the movies? Because it's a compression of the timeline. We don't have weeks. What would they do while the trials are going on in the movie? That's the problem. You have this timeline. You have things that are happening and you have to stick to it. So you can't take 2 weeks to do that. So I understand that, but I'm glad you recognize that it's wrong. It's scientifically wrong. Jill says, yeah, it's bad enough there's a black market for Botox. Can you imagine people trusting a black market vaccine? That's a big problem. Mark says, I had my students critique Outbreak. When the lab tech Kevin Spacey gets it, he turns into a pepperoni pizza. When Dustin Hoffman's wife, Renee Russo, gets it, they take off her makeup. You're so funny, Mark. Mark, what about Contagion? Did you watch it? Why don't you have your students critique that? It's at least more realistic, and it's a little harder to find things that are off, although I have a long list. Very Nika says, it's super annoying that it seems like everyone believes in the lab leak theory, no matter where they are on the political spectrum. Yeah, it's very frustrating. Can you imagine how frustrating it is to me and to my colleagues who see the data in support of a natural origin, and these people are saying things and they don't know what they're talking about? What is going on? Asks, speaking of Contagion and preparedness, thoughts on HHS canceling $600 million contract for avian flu mRNA vaccines. So RFK Jr. does not want any mRNA vaccines. They have some idea that they are really harmful. Okay. The main side effect is myocarditis, mostly in younger men. It resolves. It's treatable. You get myocarditis with COVID also. You can at higher frequency. So there's nothing dangerous about mRNA vaccines that would make them a weapon of mass destruction, as we saw in Minnesota that were trying to legislate that. So I don't know how effective avian flu mRNA vaccines are, okay? But you got to find out, right? I presume they were going to buy them here and use them. I don't know what the target population was. Doreen says, it's official. I would make a better HHS secretary than Junior. I also have no relevant training whatsoever, but I listen to experts. Yeah, that's the key. He doesn't listen to any expert except the ones he's choosing, that Trump chooses, like Bhattacharya and Makari and others. And yeah. Oh, Visto, this is brilliant. I see R0 as situational, not so much biological. Oh my God, I'm going to steal this and put it in my lecture next year. Yeah. I can't copy things here. I cannot copy. So Les or Steph or Tom, can you copy that and just text it to me? It's situational. So what is the R0 of a church versus the R0 of a drive-through bank? Yes, exactly my point. It is not not necessarily a reflection of the biological properties of the virus. That's exactly right. But nobody pays attention to these situational conditions. And so they just see the virus zipping through the population and they give it a higher R0. Say, it's the virus is mutated to become more transmissible. No. Tona, have I ever been asked to be an expert when it comes to filming or TV scripts on virology? Let's see. Have I ever asked to be? No, because probably I've been an expert witness for legal matters, right, and things like that, but never for a movie because actually, did I? No, I don't think I did. Many years ago, this lady was writing a script. And she said, I can't pay you anything, but can you tell me if it's okay? So I gave her a list of stuff that was wrong. And then about 2 months later, she said, oh, we got some money. I got an expert at the CDC to work with us. Well, what the heck? What about me? What about me? Okay. But I was in a documentary, which is not even out yet, right? It's a history of COVID. I don't know when it's supposed to come out this year. But no, I've never been. And if I have, they didn't offer to pay like that lady. SSA Montai asks, in which way is inhaled flu mist inferior to the flu shot? It's actually not inferior. The efficacy in preventing influenza disease, is about the same as the inactivated flu shot. All right. Although I'm told, and I haven't checked this out, that in certain younger populations, it's actually very good, but I don't know exactly what younger populations. Okay. So the clinical efficacy studies that are done, every year CDC at the end of the season makes an estimate of the clinical efficacy, and they're always flu mist and the inactivated are always the same. It's not inferior, but it should be better, right? You're inducing mucosal antibodies, and it's not. So I don't understand that. And I don't, in light of that, people are craving to make intranasal COVID vaccines, but I don't see. I don't see the point. Maybe you can do better. I mean, you have to try. I agree. You have to try. It's a different virus. Test monkey and Contagion would be a better HHS head. One test monkey. Mark, who survived. I am betting Vincent isn't interested in sensationalism. I don't mind sensationalism. No, not in a movie. I understand a compressed timeline, but you should try and get the science right. And nobody has yet mentioned my 3 pet peeves, and actually one of them, having one person in the vaccine trial is ridiculous. But there are a couple of other things related to the vaccine trial that are so wrong. And you know what's weird? My students don't get it either. They get all this other stuff, but they don't get that. It's really interesting. Cheese in the fridge that would make a better HHS secretary. Brian wants to know if zinc increases replication. It does, and it does. Some viruses it can, yes. Oops, that was my alt. I only asked because a lot of my friends who are applying now are discouraged from doing so, given how things are going. Well, look, it's really not easy to get into an MD PhD program. And if you get into one, you should go. And while you're interviewing, you need to talk to them about what labs are available and how's their funding and so forth. But it is quite an honor. And MD, at least MSTPs, their tuition is paid. So even if there's no research to be done and you just get an MD, it's free. How can you beat that? Only the MSTPs, right? All the folks at Micro TV, have you thought about reaching out to folks like Neil deGrasse Tyson to help spread the knowledge? I have no idea how to reach out to Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's got too many layers between him and the rest of the world. Me, I'm like one layer of an onion. The outer crispy part, you just remove that and you got Vincent, okay? I don't have to have, but he's got the whole onion with all the layers. He's in the middle of the onion. So if anyone knows how to contact him, that would be great, or his PR person. So, it would be interesting to sit down with him and say, look, we have all this information. How can you help us with this? Carol says, well, the COVID vaccine was developed in less than a year. Creating a new vaccine in 4 months was too optimistic. I agree. Even though they didn't do a proper clinical trial, 4 months is a bit too much. You know, before COVID, I would have said it takes 5 years, right? Because that was what it took. And now COVID made a new paradigm. 1 year. Yeah. Mark says, I will take whatever vaccine I can get. No problem with mRNA. I just wanted to try something protein-based. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Oh, Tom says, a line from Contagion I like. Someone doesn't have to weaponize bird flu. The birds are doing. Yes, I remember that line. That was a good line. I wonder who made that up. It's good. Les says they're talking about taking $3 billion from Harvard and giving it to trade schools. Which trade school has the best chance to advance cancer research? No, that's not what trade schools do. This is a disaster in the making. Harvard is a fantastic institution. It's got problems like everybody else does. But to destroy it is ridiculous. And to think that one stinking president could destroy it is ridiculous. Congress, how many of you graduated from Harvard? What the hell are you thinking? I'm hoping the lawyers and the judges will come through. You see, he's getting knocked back on a lot of things. I can't even remember now what we got knocked back on today. Oh, the law firms that he's attacking. The judge said, no way. And this is a judge appointed by Bush. He said, no, that's not constitutional. You can't do that. They're just trying to see what they can get away with. Oh, my God. John says, in the movie, one of the suggestions to distribute the vaccine was to add it to the water system like fluoride. I have my doubts. No, that's just ridiculous. Ridiculous. You can't control the dose. If you add it to the water system, it's an infectious vaccine, right? You put it in water, it's going to be inactivated because water there's no buffer, there's no salts. You can't do that. Good, John. Shona, Vincent, talking about the Stalin statue, it reminds me, did you get my pick of the week regarding the film of Italians who saved the Jews during the Holocaust? Of course we did, and it was on like 2 weeks ago. Tona, you're behind in your Twiv listening, or maybe you never make it to the picks. But yes, thank you very much. That was a great pick. Maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago we picked it. Yeah. Yep. Another good line. It's still changing. Response. It doesn't have anything else to do. He's talking about the virus. It doesn't have anything else to do. That's kind of insulting. Viruses, well, it's all random, right? So it's mutating and selection is going on. So having anything else to do, they're pretty busy replicating and transmitting and so forth. But it is an interesting line, yeah. No childhood vaccine for free in the U.S. Yeah, well, that's why I think some parents do not vaccinate their kids. If they don't have health insurance, they have to pay for it. Oh, Mark, remember when George Church made his own vaccine? I do. Let's see. George Church made his own vaccine. Let's see what I do remember that, but I forget the details. Yeah, he was working on a COVID vaccine. There he is. He's sticking it in his nose. He took 2 doses a week apart earlier this month. A subunit vaccine, probably Spike, right? Shouldn't have done that because, it's not properly regulated. Michael in Mexico City, 19C in heavy traffic. Good to have you. Touj asks if, do you recommend ibuprofen for a fever that I've had for a couple of days? It's 101. I'm not giving medical advice. If anyone else here is a nurse or a PA or whatever, you can give advice, but I can't do that. Personally, I wouldn't take ibuprofen. I'd take something else because ibuprofen is tough on kidneys. But ask someone else. Veronica says, by the way, for saying Stalin is like Hitler, you can be fined or even sent to prison these days. I'm not even exaggerating. Now, hopefully we don't get to that point in the U.S. Gwen says, in the movie Day 18, everyone's making deals to get the vaccines. Women from CDC gets kidnapped with orphanage, and Forsythia lines at pharmacies gets out of control. Yeah, it's probably what happened during COVID. People wanted ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, for example. Lucas says, in the movie, the general speaking of the virus is dubious, like the virus wants this or that. Yes. Anthropomorphizing the virus, which, as you know, with me is a big no-no. You should not do that. No. Kank says, why would a health economist not see the cost effectiveness of vaccinating? It's a great question. Yeah, he's a health economist. I don't know. Good question, man. He just doesn't like the mRNA vaccines, which are mainly what we use here in the U.S. He thinks there's something wrong with them. Maybe that's driving him. It's a good question. I didn't think of that. John says, in the movie, there were Forsythia and Rivaroxaban treatments, which reminded me of ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. Yeah. That's right. Supplements. Will, you haven't seen it. Still on my wish list. All right. Sorry. I looked at today at YouTube. You could buy it for $12, and then you have it in your YouTube library forever. Mike says, what advice would you give to a student overwhelmed with world events and fatigue? Take fewer courses. Well, students have access to student health services, so they should speak to a counselor for sure. They should also have student groups where you get together once a week and talk, and just talking about the problems sometimes helps a lot. But, if you're taking, sometimes you have to take a lot of courses to graduate, right? But if you're taking excess and you don't have to, then you could cut back one. Yeah, that would help. Mark says, I will let them critique Contagion this fall. I like Contagion. The fears and need for speed came across well. I just would have suspected more rioting. Vincent, the anti-mRNA people remind me of folks protesting nuclear power plants while smoking cigarettes. Indeed. So Hans here says, Winslet says the average person touches their face between 2,000 and 3,000 times a day, but that's not true. The average is 368. I have not touched my face once during this live stream. I've touched my head, right, but not my face. I do touch my face from time to time during the day, but more like hundreds, not thousands. I agree with that. And there are studies that show that, right? Here's a link to Lipkin's Financial Times piece that was just mentioned. Ryan says, can myocarditis be related with accidental intravesical injection of liposomes? Intravenous. So a study came out some years ago in mice showing that if you injected the virus intramuscularly, you didn't get any myocarditis. But if you injected it intravenously, you got a lot of myocarditis. So that could be related to it. Daniel Griffin said no, that wasn't related to it, but it seems that that mouse experiment suggests that it might be. Well, we'd actually know because no one has done this study. You can't give people IV mRNA vaccines. It's not ethical, right? Elizabeth, this is good. Lab leak is code for blaming scientists and distrusting science. It's not about a theory. It's about calling someone's fault. That's right, blaming someone. It's all political. It's all political. 1,000 points to Visto. Yes, really good way of looking at R naught. Thank you. Mark says, honestly, I get tired of the anti-mRNA stuff. Folks without a single biology class lecture me about it. Yeah, Mark, all you have to do is do a Google search and you're an expert on anything. Didn't you know? But seriously, this is what people are doing. They think I got lectured some email the other day why I'm wrong about the natural origins of SARS-CoV-2. I mean, I threw it away. I'm not going to listen to this guy. He says, oh, I've listened to all of your arguments and I don't think, here's what he said or she. I think the lab leak is easier to understand. Well, that's not how it works. Okay. Let's see. John says, instead of distributing the vaccine to the vulnerable population, they went purely random. I think it was based on birth date. Has that ever been done for a new vaccine? No. You would do it if you have limited vaccine, you do it based on a vulnerable population. Although some countries said, old folks, sorry, you're at the end of life, EOL, we're not going to give you a vaccine. Goodbye, Mark. Make a good dinner and have a safe travel to Ireland. Have you seen Arrival? No. Thoughts on the possible microbes from aliens? Yes. So if an alien came here from somewhere else, which I think is highly unlikely because it's too far away, but who knows? They would have other microbes, I guess. And so, yeah, that would be a problem. What are your thoughts on the CDC removing the COVID vaccine for healthy children? It's horrible. If kids already have 3 doses, I think that's okay, but the parents should have a choice. It was licensed and now they take it away. That's not right. But if you're a newborn and you reach 5 years of age, you should be able to get the full course of COVID vaccines. Hello, Vanity, our moderator. Welcome. Oh, Tom says, it reminded me of the draft lottery. I remember my number, Tom, 327. Oh, boy. Gwen says, the dead virus is killing all the mice in the movie and decide the R naught is 4. Okay, here we go, Elizabeth. Also, a shot to test. She sticks it in her thigh, and then the nasal vaccine is rolled out. Yes, that is ridiculous. You test it the way you're going to roll it out. Now, the story here is, and Ian has told me this, they were going to spray it up her nose, and the actor, maybe it was Hextall's person, said, this is not dramatic enough. I want to stick it in my thigh. So Ian was not on set. He was the science consultant, one of them. So they said, sure, do it, stick it in your thigh. And no science is consulted. So there you go. So that's good, Elizabeth. That's another one. And let's see if anyone gets the third pet peeve of mine around the vaccines. Neil deGrasse Tyson is a MAGA enthusiast. Really? I didn't know that. Is that true? Tona, Vincent, tell us more about your documentary. It's produced by a company in England. They came to the incubator in February last year or the year before, and they did a lot of shooting, and they had me like narrate, like I was a news person sitting in my studio narrating the different events. So they were going to make me an anchor at different points in the movie. And then later that year, I was at a coronavirus meeting in Switzerland, and I got permission for them to come in and interview people, and they did more shooting of me. So I said it was going to have a substantial role. I don't remember the company that's doing it, and it's supposed to be out this year, and then I don't know. That's all I know. Okay. I'm a smaller onion than you. Well, it doesn't matter. Wait, is this office hours? Is Tim Heidecker going to show up soon? No, this is my office hours where we talk about science. Yeah, we don't have I'm going to tell you some of my things here because we're getting to the end of the comments and no one's coming through with it. Midge says, well, Vincent, I'm glad you're on the outside of the onion as it's a protection level, and that's what you are to us. Not only a good teacher, but a protector. Thank you so much. It's very kind of you, Midge. Very kind of you. Molly told an anti-vaxxer that people in Africa are begging for a vaccine. She didn't believe me. Of course, it doesn't suit her narrative, right? It's not me that doesn't allow links. It's YouTube. Unless you're a moderator, you can't put in links. Not my doing. Will says, if the Senate fully approves the big, beautiful bill, the USA will be officially a dictatorship. That's right. That's right. MZY wants to know, how can poliovirus be eradicated from Pakistan and Afghanistan? They're the only countries having circulating wild polio, but there are plenty of other countries with vaccine-derived polio, and it's an even bigger problem. So I'm not even worried about Pakistan and Afghanistan. There, the problem is the vaccinators can't get in. There's too much violence. John says, Jude Law thinks long-term adverse effects of vaccines will occur long after 2 to 4 weeks in the movie. That seemed aligned with his conspiracy mindset. Yeah, of course, with no evidence, right? If attenuated virus, the vaccine and contagion, could dissemination be with people paid to sneeze in the subway? Probably not. It depends on how, attenuated it is. It may not be able to transmit well. Molly says, yes, ibuprofen will lower your fever. Tylenol will too. Yeah, some people overlap them, right? Every so many hours. But ibuprofen is going to be tough on your kidneys, right? Our favorite nephrologist, Carol. We have a 16-foot statue of Stalin here in the Fremont neighborhood of Seattle. Why, Mike? For God's sakes, why? He's a horrible man. Goodbye, Markle. Thanks for coming. Stephanie asks, hope Amy is okay. Thank you. SRR, thank you for your support of science communication. I really appreciate it. Dorothy says, yes, remind Amy that we care. "16-foot statue of Lenin." Okay, so it's Lenin, not Stalin. Okay, It's still ridiculous, right? I just touched my face like 57 times during that sentence. Go autism. Vincent, you worked a lot on polio. A newer mRNA vaccine will be a good option. No, it doesn't. Uh, I don't know if it's been tested, but they're yeah, I just don't know. It might not work. But from what I've heard, nobody's looking at mRNA vaccines for poliovirus. I think IPV, inactivated polio vaccine, should be used globally, and that will prevent people from getting paralyzed. Yeah, so Will hits it on the head. The blaming science. Pharmacy have to get drugs tested and approved by FDA. Supplements, not so. Yep. So Gwen is watching the movie. Day 133, vaccine rollout with lottery birth dates. Keep your distance. In reality, they had all us old folks lined up at a huge supermarket in lines with no safe distancing. That's right. I remember that. Yep. And standing outside, very cold weather also, remember? Ralph Barrick, virologist of 40 years, you can't rule that out. Yeah, you can. There's plenty of evidence to rule it out. So I agree with what you're saying that being a virologist for 40 years is not enough. So I usually don't use that. But it's not just me. There are many other virologists that understand the data. You can rule it out. Let's see. I don't know the answer to this. What information on your blood work would give signs of an immunocompromised system? So I don't know if standard bloods would reveal that. Okay. I think you'd have to do more specialized assays, but I just don't know. John, thank you so much for your support of science communication. I read CDC investigators felt seen with regard to the movie at the time, and that made me think how the work is necessary but often thankless. Yeah. Thank you very much, John. Wouldn't alien viruses be too different? Could be. Yeah, alien life may be very different, and their viruses, yeah, that's a good point. Doreen, thank you for your contribution to science communication. Really appreciate it. Neil is buddies with Joe Rogan these days. That's really sad. So I don't want to hook up with Neil then, right? Tom says in Contagion, last week I mentioned the paramyxovirus contradiction recombination, but I think I know why they chose that group, but it's a subtle argument. Well, it's kind of loosely based on Nipah virus, right, which is a paramyxovirus. Tom says in Contagion, vaccines don't confer magic shield against infection. Played fast and loose with the immune system. Very Nika says there are not good allegations against Neil, so it's better to stay away from him. Okay, Gwen liked the movie. Never watched it before. Hello, Gian from Tampere. 11C, summer's in full swing. Hello, Silvio Pina from Bologna, Italy. Very nice. Elizabeth says, I get that he was playing a part, but I've gone right off Jude Law because of this movie. It's funny. It's funny. Yeah, huge lines of people for testing and vaccines. We did exactly that with COVID. Yeah, so a lot of the things in the movie happened during the pandemic. It was a hugely popular movie during the pandemic because it, in many ways, accurately portrayed the sociological things going on. But as I've said, some of the science is suspect. Okay, Leem says immunocompromised, which most often show up as low white count, low neutrophils are common, but if someone has leukemia, they will have white counts. So, immunocompromised, there are lots, as you know, Liam, there are lots of different kinds of There's innate immunocompromised, all kinds of interferon problems. There are antibody. There are all the cells, the CD4, the CD8. So it's complicated. Sylvia Pina, thank you for your support of science communication. Really appreciate it. Okay, let me tell you some of the things that I had a problem with Contagion. All right, so we've talked about vaccine development. One monkey tested is ridiculous. The vaccine was tested on one person, Dr. Hextall, who stuck it in her thigh, but it comes out as a nasal spray. Okay. And the other thing, she goes to visit her dad who's sick in one of these armories, right? To challenge herself the day she sticks the needle in her thigh. This is wrong, folks, right? You have to wait 2 weeks to challenge. So that's bad. So those are my big ones. And most of my students don't get those. So here are a couple of other brief things, all right? So she shakes the Gwyneth Paltrow, right? She shakes hands with the chef who had just stuck his hand in the pig. And so she has her virus on her hands. And then she contaminates all these people, like within a day or two, blowing on the chips in the casino. As I said, there's an incubation period, so that's just not correct. You need time for the virus to reproduce in her. Okay, so then there's Matt Damon, who we find was exposed because he's living with Paltrow, and he doesn't have any symptoms. So they put him in a containment cell for a couple of days. Probably they would do longer, 2 weeks in real world, because you don't know what the shedding period is. Yes. And another thing is putting all these people in these armories. It's ridiculous. If it's an airborne virus, that's absurd, right? It's just going to get them all sick. They have a crystal structure before the virus is grown in cell culture. That seems a little iffy. They say that the genome varies between 14 and 19 kilobases in length. What? 20% variation in size? No, viruses don't do that. And they calculate the R0 from the sequence. Oh my gosh. No, you can't do that. The R0 increasing is wrong, as we've already said. And there's also some talk about mutating to higher virulence. That's just ridiculous. But most people are not going to get all this stuff. They're going to look at it and there's a drama and all that, and they're going to like it as entertainment. And that's fine. But for my class, it's a great exercise because they've just taken a whole course on virology, 3 months, and to see what's wrong. And I like doing that. And I would hope that you guys would buy in, but you didn't. A few of you did, so thank you, but it's okay. Let's see what else we have here. Dorothy says, Tylenol is able to cause liver damage. Right. I use naproxen sodium Aleve for sore muscles, but I think that the high fever is how our bodies fight invading virus or bacteria, so I tolerate fevers. But you don't want to go too high, right? Because then you have a febrile seizure. Yeah, it's okay. Any virus that can infect mitochondria, yes. There are mitoviruses, MITO. And the idea is that, mitochondria used to be free-living microbes, maybe archaea or bacteria. And they came into our cells and they became mitochondria, and they brought viruses with them. So that's the origin of that. All right, so it's 9:20. I could do a mini lecture, okay? And that'll probably end us up. This is part 2 of antivirals. Keep asking your questions. But the Contagion didn't work so well, but it's okay. Let's see. We're going to play this, and we will turn on the screen share. Antivirals Part 2. Okay, and I have a great quote from Leo Tolstoy again, right? We talked about that last week. So we have antivirals that hit every stage of virus reproduction, from attachment all the way through to release. And I want to go through and talk about some of these examples at each step, okay? So let's talk about an entry inhibitor. This is amantadine, this funny molecule that we looked at last time, which was approved in the 60s, but we didn't figure out how it worked until the 90s. It turns out it interacts with the influenza virus M2 protein, which is an ion channel. What does that mean? So when influenza virus is taken up into the cell by endocytosis, as shown in this diagram, the endocytic pathway features acidification of the interior by pumping of protons into the interior of the endosome, right? More protons, the pH drops. The ion channel is in the membrane of the influenza virus particles. So those protons go through the channel into the interior of the influenza virus, and that is necessary to release the RNA when the fusion between the virus and the cell happens. All right, so the ion channel is essential, and what amantadine does is it blocks the channel, so it blocks entry of protons into the virus particle and prevents uncoating. So here's a picture of the virus membrane with the ion channel. It's a tetramer, right? So it's relatively short, but there are 4 chains there. And this channel allows protons to go from the endosome to the inside of the virus. And so amantadine can bind either inside the channel or outside, and that blocks protons from getting in. Now, we don't use amantadine anymore because there's widespread resistance in the currently circulating influenza viruses. And these amino acid changes basically prevent amantadine from binding. So the viruses are resistant. Another entry inhibitor is maraviroc, which is an HIV drug. It's a CCR5 inhibitor. Now, when HIV spike binds the cell receptor CD4, it also needs a second receptor, CCR5, to get into the cell. And maraviroc binds to CCR5 and prevents entry. So here's maraviroc in Part A. And in Part B is the structure of CCR5 with maraviroc bound. You could just see it in blue there. And that's enough to prevent HIV from binding and getting into the cell. Okay, so that's another entry inhibitor. Now, while we're on the topic of entry, let's talk about why hydroxychloroquine failed, because it has to do with entry. So hydroxychloroquine before COVID was known to inhibit infection by multiple viruses by inhibiting the acidification of the endosome. All right, so hydroxychloroquine inhibits acidification of the endosome, which we just talked about with respect to influenza virus, right? A lab found that in cells in culture, hydroxychloroquine could inhibit SARS-CoV-2 reproduction. And based only on that, it was given an emergency use authorization in the U.S. Basically, Trump told the FDA to approve it. He made them approve it. But it didn't work. It made many people sicker. Why didn't it work? Well, it turns out the cells in culture were from kidneys. They weren't respiratory cells. In kidneys, the virus binds ACE2 receptor. It's taken up by endocytosis. And normally, there is an enzyme in endosomes called cathepsin that would cleave the spike and catalyze fusion. But in respiratory cells, the virus does not go into cells by endocytosis. It binds at the surface where there is a protease called TMPRSS2, which cleaves the spike and allows for fusion at the cell surface. So there's nowhere that hydroxychloroquine can work. As I said, hydroxychloroquine inhibits acidification of the endosome, which inhibits the activity of this protease that would cleave the spike. So you have inhibition of virus entry. but in lungs, it doesn't go in the endosome. So there's no way that hydroxychloroquine could work. And we knew this, yet it was ignored. The basic biology was ignored. Okay, enough ranting. So let's move into polymerase inhibitors. And we'll talk about first acyclovir, which was the first generation anti-herpes simplex virus drug. It is a prodrug because the acyclovir has to be activated and turned into something else, as you'll see in a minute. It is a nucleoside analog. What does that mean? A nucleoside analog, well, first of all, there are 4 nucleosides that are used to build DNA or RNA, right? A, G, C, and the T are either U. If it's RNA, it's a U. So these are nucleosides because there are no phosphates on them yet. If you put phosphates from 1 to 3, they're called nucleotides. Now, you're never going to use that information again, but it's really important when we talk about inhibitors. Nucleoside, no phosphate. Nucleotide, 1 to 3 phosphate. So here's acyclovir. It's a modification of guanosine. We have the ribose sugar and the base at the top there. And you can see that in acyclovir, the ribose has been broken. And the second generation, ganciclovir, some modifications. This is what we, one thing that's used for some herpes viruses, and also valacyclovir, as we'll see later. So basically, this molecule cannot participate in DNA synthesis. It causes chain termination. Before we leave this slide, look at all these other drugs that are modifications of the 4 nucleosides, right? Ribavirin, AZT, etc. Okay. How does acyclovir work? Here's acyclovir. It can get into cells. It's not phosphorylated, so no problem getting into cells. In the cell, if it's infected with herpes simplex virus, there's an enzyme made by HSV1 called thymidine kinase, TK, that phosphorylates acyclovir. And once 1 phosphate is on, then the cell quickly puts 2 and 3 phosphates on. This first step is very slow when you use a cell enzyme, but also the fact that you're using a viral enzyme makes it specific for virus-infected cells. So no side effects. It's brilliant. Okay, so this now is a nucleotide. It's actually acyclovir triphosphate. We got acyclovir triphosphate. The viral DNA polymerase is copying DNA, and then at some point, this is an analog of G. When there's a C, it gets put in, and then DNA synthesis stops because there's no hydroxyl on the ribose to allow attachment of the next base. So it's a chain terminator for that reason, okay? So you're going to see in many of these nucleoside analogs that they cause chain termination because there's some mess up in the ribose. You need to have a ribose with a hydroxyl here to continue DNA synthesis. Okay. Now, acyclovir was improved to make it orally bioavailable. So acyclovir you can put on cold sores, right? But if you need to give someone a pill if they have other kinds of herpes infections, you can make a modification, just attach the amino acid valine to acyclovir. And then after oral administration, the valine is removed by cellular enzymes, and now you have acyclovir in the cell. And this is orally bioavailable, whereas acyclovir is not. Now, unfortunately, we get acyclovir resistance in herpes simplex virus-infected cells. These arise again spontaneously during replication, right? Viruses make errors. And there are 2 classes of mutants. Some mutants cannot phosphorylate the prodrug. So these mutants, these changes, the amino acid changes or the mutations are in the viral TK gene. So the TK gene can no longer phosphorylate acyclovir, so the virus is resistant. Then the other mutations cannot incorporate the drug into DNA. These mutations are in the gene encoding the viral DNA polymerase. Right? So that's how acyclovir works, and that's how you get resistance. Now, the first HIV drug was a chain terminator, AZT. This was a drug that had been discovered during screens for anti-tumor cell compounds. Here it is, AZT, right? So it is, let's see what it's a modification of AZT is a modification of thymidine, okay? So AZT is here, and you can see it has a azido group, 3 nitrogens. That's an azido group instead of a hydroxyl. So you can imagine, you can already predict it's going to be a chain terminator. So this gets into a cell. The cell phosphorylates it because there's no virus enzyme that can do that. Puts on 1, 2, and 3 phosphates, and then it's incorporated into the growing DNA. So this is DNA being made by reverse transcriptase, for example, of HIV, and the chain elongation stops. So it's a chain terminator. It's not a good substrate for most cellular polymerases. This is better for HIV than for cell, but there still are side effects because it does get incorporated to some extent, and lots of side effects, unlike AZT. And when it was first used for HIV, it was given orally, but the half-life is an hour. So you had to be dosed 2 to 3 times a day, and that's, of course, a recipe for selecting mutants. So once again, AZT is a modification of thymidine. Now, if you watched the Dallas Buyers Club, this is a great story about AZT. Early on, when AZT was first used, there wasn't enough to go around, so patients started splitting pills and sharing them, and that actually showed the National Cancer Institute that the dose could be reduced and given to more people. Unfortunately, very quickly, mutants resistant to AZT arose after the drug was licensed. These are single amino acid changes at one of 4 sites in reverse transcriptase, which is shown here. Here's the active site in yellow. And these altered RTs do not bind the phosphorylated AZT. And so what was then done was to develop other nucleoside analogs based on other bases, of course. And, of course, when used singly, they gave rise to resistance. So this led to the idea of using 2 antiviral drugs, but still resistance to 2 drugs arose in less than a year. And so non-nucleoside HIV-RT inhibitors were developed. So in the reverse transcriptase enzyme, which is shown here, we have the active site, and we have RNA passing through the active site being converted to DNA, which is blue. And remember, the AZT and the other nucleoside analogs are binding the active site and stopping chain elongation. But these non-nucleoside inhibitors bind away from the active site, and they change the conformation of the enzyme so it doesn't work anymore. And these include nevirapine, delaviridine, and efavirenz. And again, when used singly, you get resistance rapidly, amino acid substitutions in any of the 7 residues that line the binding site of, say, nevirapine. So you cannot use these alone for treating AIDS. Now they're used in combination therapy. SARS-CoV-2 nucleoside analogs. Remdesivir is a big one. This is a prodrug of adenosine. Here's adenosine, and here's remdesivir. So you can see adenosine is here, but it's different. It's got an azido group here. But it's also got this interesting appendage on the left with a phosphate. So people were not able to use nucleotide inhibitors with 1 or more phosphates because they don't get into the cell effectively. The phosphate has a negative charge, and so does the cell membrane. But chemists figured out that they could mask the phosphate with other side groups. And then when you take this drug, the side groups are cleaved off, and now you have 1 phosphate on, which is the slowest part of the reaction, so the cell can then put 2 or 3 phosphates on. So this is really a revolutionary finding that you could now put phosphates in there. This drug was originally developed for Ebola virus. It works by chain terminating. It was approved for COVID, but of course it's delivered intravenously. Now, it doesn't, originally it was not found to work on people who are hospitalized. That's now different if you get it early enough. But if you're before hospitalization, if you give it within 7 days of infection, you have an 87% reduction in progression to hospitalization. So it's a very effective drug. Molnupiravir is also a nucleoside analog, right? There's no phosphates here. Here's cytidine, and molnupiravir is a derivative of cytidine, which templates as AU. And this was found to inhibit SARS-CoV-2 replication in cells and in mice. It inhibits replication and transmission in ferrets. It's taken orally compared with remdesivir, which is intravenous, and it is used in the U.S. for people who can't use remdesivir. Okay, so then there are integrase inhibitors. You remember that the DNA of HIV and other retroviruses has to integrate into the cell DNA, and that requires an enzyme called integrase. And what happens here is that the integrase is shown as this tan molecule. It binds the viral DNA, it binds the cell DNA, and it makes a series of cuts and ligations to join the two. And here are two integrase inhibitors which bind into the active site. And so what's happening here is this is the 3' hydroxyl of the DNA, and this is right near the active site, and this would be joined to the viral DNA. But in the presence of the drug, which is shown here, this is this magenta and the cyan. These are the two drugs. It pushes the end of the DNA away from the active site so it can't work anymore. So it prevents integration and virus replication. There are polymerase inhibitors for hepatitis C virus now. One of them is called sofosbuvir, and again, it has it's a modification of a nucleoside, and it has a chemical group that hides the phosphate. And so you take it's already basically a monophosphate. When you take this drug, these protective groups are taken off, so you have a monophosphate which is diphosphorylated, and it's now active. This is very expensive, but it does work, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. There's a new influenza virus antiviral called baloxavir, relatively new. It was approved in 2018. It's an inhibitor of the endonuclease of influenza virus. Here's the molecule. Dixon would call it dihydroxy chicken wire. The endonuclease functions during RNA synthesis. It takes cellular mRNAs and chops off about 13 bases, and that's used as a primer for mRNA synthesis. And the enzyme that does this chopping is the endonuclease that's inhibited by baloxavir. I'm told that it's one dose, and you can take it up to a couple of days after infection, so supposedly better than Tamiflu, but no one seems to know about it. Then we have protease inhibitors that are needed for virus, for cutting virus proteins. And the HIV protease is absolutely required for the production of infectious virus particles. When HIV first buds from the cell, the capsid is not matured. There's a protease in the capsid that then cleaves proteins, and you get the mature virus particle. So without that protease, you don't get infectivity. So antivirals were developed that are called peptidomimetics. They mimic the substrate of the protease. So ritonavir basically looks like a series of amino acids that are present in the cleavage site of the enzyme. So here's the protease, and there's ritonavir in it. So ritonavir inhibits the protease. Now, you may remember that ritonavir is part of Paxlovid, right? There is an Mpro inhibitor, and there is ritonavir. So what's going on? Ritonavir, it turns out, inhibits a liver enzyme, CYP3, that processes drugs. So it increases the half-life of many drugs, and that's why it's included in Paxlovid. It increases the half-life of the other inhibitor, which is a protease inhibitor. There's also a protease inhibitor for hep C. The genome is translated to a long protein, and all these bonds are cleaved by the NS3 protease. And this is an inhibitor, which is also a peptidomimetic called telaprevir. And here's SARS-CoV-2. This is the Mpro inhibitor without ritonavir. Processing is needed to make the enzymes that replicate the RNA of coronaviruses, and that's done by Mpro. And this drug was developed here that fits into the active site of the Mpro protease and has very good activity against a variety of coronaviruses, including SARS-CoV-2. And so that's one of the components of Paxlovid. Influenza virus neuraminidase inhibitors inhibit virus release from cells. The neuraminidase is needed on the surface of the particle to cleave receptors from the cell surface. Otherwise, the released virus particles would just stick to each other in the absence of neuraminidase. And so you've heard of Tamifluenza or Tamiflu. These were made by computer-aided design to mimic sialic acid, which is the receptor for influenza virus. And they fit into the active site of the neuraminidase, and they block release of the virus from cells. You do get resistance mainly against oseltamivir. These inhibitors were designed to mimic sialic acid. So here's neuraminidase binding sialic acid. Zanamivir looks very much like sialic acid, and so you don't see much resistance because then sialic acid wouldn't be able to bind the neuraminidase. But oseltamivir is different, as you can see by the icon here. And so there are amino acid changes in the neuraminidase that block oseltamivir binding resistance. Can you get broad spectrum antivirals? Well, here's a proof of concept. It's called LJ001. It inhibits enveloped viruses, but not non-enveloped viruses. So what this does, it breaks the viral membrane. And here you see here's the chemical structure. If you mix it with vesicular stomatitis virus here, you can see the virus particles are broken up, whereas a related compound didn't have that effect. This drug was never brought to market, but it's kind of a proof of concept of a broad spectrum antiviral. Now, can you get broad spectrum antivirals? Well, here's one, favipiravir, which is a broad spectrum inhibitor of RNA viruses. It is a nucleoside analog taken up into the cell. It's phosphorylated and incorporated into growing RNA change. It inhibits a lot of viruses, as you can see here. It's licensed in Japan to treat influenza. We also have a broad-spectrum DNA virus inhibitor, cidofovir, which is an acyclic cytosine derivative. You can see the phosphate again here, protected by some other groups. It's phosphorylated by host cell enzyme and then inhibits the DNA polymerase by chain termination. So these are not used in the U.S., but obviously you can make broad-spectrum inhibitors. And we'll end up with two stories of antiviral success: combination therapy for AIDS and hep C. We've talked about the variety of antivirals for inhibiting HIV entry, reverse transcription, integrase, protease, and similar enzymes for hep C. And how do they work? So combination therapy, highly active antiretroviral therapy. You have three drugs that target different mechanisms. Now, it doesn't cure the infection because you still have DNA integrated into long-lived memory T cells, but it will keep you healthy. It will keep you alive. Here's the mathematics of drug resistance. If you assume one mutation is needed for drug resistance, and the mutation rate in, say, HIV is 1 for every 10,000 bases polymerized, that means in every 10,000 viruses, which a single cell can easily make, each base is substituted in every of the whole genome is substituted in every 10,000 viruses. Each person makes 10 to the 10th viruses a day. And so 1,000,000 viruses will be produced each day with resistance to one drug. That's why one drug doesn't work. How about two drugs? Well, the resistance is 10 to the 4th times 10 to the 4th or 10 to the 8th. Again, we make 10 to the 10th particles a day. That means 100 viruses arise that are resistant to 2 drugs per day. But resistance to 3 drugs is harder. You need 10 to the 12 viruses per day. Although it still can happen. And if you have a newly diagnosed AIDS patient, you have to sequence the viral genome to make sure you're using the right triple therapy. Here are all the HIV licensed drugs as of a couple of years ago. We have RT nucleoside inhibitors, non-nucleoside inhibitors, protease, integrase, entry, and then you have your combination therapies down here, all different combinations depending on the particular virus you're infected with. Antiretroviral therapy saves lives. These are the these numbers of people receiving antiretroviral therapy, and most in the African region, which has the highest burden, as you know. And we have averted millions of adult deaths using antiretroviral therapy. And we've also prevented a lot of mother-to-child transmissions. And so new HIV infections transmitted by this route are shown in blue. They're decreasing, as the red is the new HIV infections averted due to pregnant mother-to-child transmission. We also do pre-exposure prophylaxis, right? Daily double therapy for those at high risk reduces the risk of transmission by over 90%, and it reduces the risk by IVDU, intravenous drug use, by over 70%. And for Hep C, the story is similar. We started out years ago with a kind of ineffective therapy of interferon and ribavirin, which would take 80 weeks if the patient even finished the therapy, had so many side effects. And then specific inhibitors were developed like boceprevir and telaprevir, and they slowly reduced the time of treatment until currently, we can have double or triple therapy for Hep C, less than 20 weeks, clearing the infection. Very different from HIV because there is no integration of Hep C. So you can cure a Hep C infection. Now, despite all this good news, there are 10 to the 16th HIV genomes on the planet today. What does that mean? That means genomes already exist that are resistant to all of those antiviral drugs that we have or any that we will ever make. That's how big that number is. Okay. Any questions about that? Stick them in the chat. We have about 12 minutes here. Let's see what we got. Let's see. Who did I end with? Now I don't even remember. Talking about fever. Maraviroc would be an awesome name for a metal band. It would. Pete, you can just buy it or rent it on YouTube. It's cheap. Steph just texts the inconsistencies in Contagion as listed by Gemini AI. Thank you. Okay. So let's go down to recent chats. Liam says, I noticed they correctly distinguished between isolation and quarantine. That was good, yeah. And Nevitt says, I'm fascinated by amantadine. It blocks the channel. Yes, that was blind screening of compounds back in the 60s. No targeted screening. And yes, Pete, you saw molnupiravir is another nucleoside analogs. Yep. It's all chemistry, folks. Yep. Visto says nucleoside type drugs give the virus the wrong Lego blocks to build with. Yeah, that's good. Then you can't add more Legos on to it. Yep. Leem says acetaminophen paracetamol will decrease a fever, but clinical trials overwhelmingly find it will not reduce the incidence of febrile seizures. All right, thank you. I didn't know that. So I don't know the answer to this. Why do people take it to reduce their fever then? GRR lost smell from COVID and lost it again with flu, right? And now something else. This is Mina had some kind of neurological change. So I'm assuming you recovered from the COVID inability to smell and taste. So other viruses can cause that. Influenza can cause it, and sometimes it takes a long time to resolve, a very long time. So um, the neurons, the nerve cells are not damaged. It's the supporting cells in the olfactory epithelium that are damaged, and they can recover, but it does take time. Nevitz, fun fact regarding the azide group, the N3. Sodium azide, Na sodium N3, is a compound that was used in automobile airbags, can be very explosive. Are nucleoside molecules ever taken up by normal human cells? Yes. Yes, they are, and that's why they may have side effects. Yep. Tom says HIV maturation is fascinating. All those proteolytic cleavages and protein rearrangements and energy landscape cascade. Very poetic, Tom. I like that. Very unique. It says favipiravir is loved by many Russians. It's interesting. For what? Do you know? Can't get it here in the U.S. Yes, if anyone has questions for Daniel at microbe.tv, we're recording tomorrow. You can send them in. Vista, always very clever. Viruses explore the chemical possibility space like a supercomputer. We're on the wrong side of the power law in this fight. That's great. I love it. Really good. What is the positive or negative sense RNA? So it's just so the positive RNA is the RNA that's translated into protein, and the minus is the opposite strand. And so the plus strand of DNA is the same as the plus strand of RNA. And the direction of the polymerase, so the polymerase always copies the template 3' to 5' and synthesizes 5' to 3'. And, we did do a mini lecture on nucleic acid synthesis here some time ago. But copied 3' to 5', which has nothing to do with the plus or minus. It's all nucleic acids have a 5' and a 3' end. Copied 3 to 5, polymerized 5 to 3. And actually, there are nice hepatitis B virus maturation inhibitors, and they're licensed, and others under development as well. It was way above my head, Vincent. Tried to follow. Sorry. I think you got something from it, though. Laura, thank you for your contribution to science communication. Really appreciate it. From your mini lecture, it's interesting to hear that the half-life can be altered. I always thought that was something specific to a drug. No, so there are enzymes in the liver that turn over drugs, and if you inhibit those enzymes with like ritonavir, you can extend the half-life of the drug, right? That's why ritonavir is in Paxlovid, to extend the half-life of the protease inhibitor. Can we not, MZY says, invest in broad spectrum RNA vaccines and or broad spectrum DNA vaccines for development rather than antivirals? Well, the problem is that no vaccine is going to cover all, say, RNA viruses or all DNA viruses. They're too different. You could make a broad spectrum vaccine for influenza viruses or for coronaviruses, right? Or for DNA virus families, like for maybe even herpes viruses are too different for that. So that's where the drugs have an advantage. They can hit all RNA or all DNA viruses. So, yeah, but the vaccine gives you protection before you're infected and has memory. So really, vaccination is the way to go. And then if you are infected, then take an antiviral. Dr. Bro Shropshire, thank you for your support of science communication. We need it in these times, and we appreciate your help. Last word Tom has on Contagion. It's a morality play. Yeah, it is in the end. It is. And Dorothy's got it. That's why you rewatch the mini lectures. By the third pass, you understand more. So those of you who didn't get it, rewatch it or go to my Columbia lectures. I know you don't have time for that, right? You've got 2 hours Wednesday night and you're going to learn something here. I appreciate that. But if you have time, watch it a couple of times and I think you'll pick it up. I try to keep it relatively straightforward. I mean, I say, here's the compound, but you don't really need to see much except that it's an analog, say, of a triphosphate or something like that. But anyway, I appreciate you listening. It's good. Danny, yeah, we're live, but we're about to wrap it up. Sorry. Coralie, thank you. I'm glad you learn. Really, that's what I want you to do. And if you say I didn't, much of it was above my head, I feel badly because I don't want that to be the case. And so next time I'll try harder. All right, folks, that'll do it for another office hours. The next one. So the schedule over at microbe.tv/calendar is all fixed through June. But I can tell you right now, so today is the 28th. So the next one is going to be June 4th, 8 p.m. Eastern. Okay, the next office hours. I want to thank our moderators tonight. We had Tom, we had Steph, and we had Les. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks to everyone else. We had 130 people and 130 likes. That's great. Sorry you didn't dig the Contagion thing. Oh, well, I tried. But now you know what I think about some of the science in the movie. And, the virology course, as John points out, is only 25 lectures. It's free, no commercials. And I repost it every year on YouTube. All right, everybody. I really love being here and teaching you and listening to your chat. So I very much appreciate your coming. Bring your questions back next week. There's always something good. We're going to do some more mini lectures to finish my virology course, and then we'll make some mini lectures on topics that people have requested, like BK virus, HPV. Until next week, folks, be safe. Thank you all. Bye-bye.